So a lot of the questions I get when people say, oh, you worked at FDA, what happens to my 510K when I send it to FDA? It's this black box. We have no idea what goes on. All of a sudden, we'll hear from a reviewer at 15 days, 60 days. But what's going on behind those closed doors in Silver Spring? So I'm going to go over a case study. I received a redacted copy of a 510K. And the redacted copy actually has a lot of information in it. They didn't redact a lot, which is shocking. So you can actually see the back and forth with the reviewer and the sponsor. And you get an idea of what the reviewer has been writing and what their thought process is through the review cycle. The next thing I'm going to do is just a couple slides on deficiency writing. So every reviewer is now trained on how to write deficiencies. They're not so great at it when they're new at FDA, so I'm going to tell you about Fourpart Harmony. Some of you might be familiar with it. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of deficiencies and what's wrong with them and what's right with them. So Rob had a great slide with the database. So this is the 510K database. I looked up this is for a client that was looking for something that had a nano coating. That was something they wanted. They had a nano metal coating and they wanted a predicate. So this popped up. It's called, actually, I don't even think the name's on it. C-Spine's the company. They're here in San Diego. You can see the registration number, or the regulation number and the classification number. So it's their 3-letter code, MAX. You can see that they did a 510K, a traditional 510K, sort of the 4th thing from the bottom. And then finally, it's a statement. So there are 2 options, and I know Rob's going to go into this. Is Rob gone? He's going to go into this a little further. You have 2 options. You can either submit a 510K summary or a 510K statement. The statement is just essentially your indications for use and nothing else. The 510K summary is a really good summary of all the testing that you submitted to FDA to demonstrate substantial equivalence. So that becomes public. You can stamp confidential on it as much as you want, but that will be, when you click on that link, the summary will pop up, or the statement. So the nice thing about 510K statements is that you, as a competitor, if this is a predicate device you're interested in, your competitors said that they will comply to 21 CFR 807.93, which says, I will make available all information included in this pre-market notification on safety and effectiveness within 30 days of request by any person. So if you request this 510K, they have to send it to you within 30 days. They can send a highly redacted copy. So I've received some that are just black, the whole thing, 500 pages of black. And you can complain to FDA and say, this isn't fair, they redacted everything. FDA will often go back to the company and say, hey, you're not supposed to redact as much, try again. So they'll sort of help mediate. It's very rare that you'll get a lot of information, but there might be enough that you can understand what testing maybe that they did. So this company in San Diego had a peak cage. It's something that slides between your vertebral bodies to make disk space. And they wanted to spray it with a nano metal coating. So I think that's what NM stands for, is nano metal. It's called the Hollywood. It's very California. So probably the company went through deciding when to submit a 510K. They had a cage already. This is a K97 guidance document from FDA. It's from 1997. FDA tried to come out with one a couple years back, and a new guidance document. Industry hated it. FDA didn't like it either. They redacted it, or they rescinded it, and they have no plans on having it be a finalized guidance document. So they withdrew it. They said, we're going to stick to the 97 document. This is what you should download. It's public on the FDA website. So what they did is they probably went through the main flow chart, which you'll find at the end of the guidance document. So, and it sort of feeds you through when you should file a 510K if you're making a change to your device. So the first question is it change due to a recall or a corrective action? No, in this case. Is it a labeling change? No, keep moving down. The next one is it a technology or performance change? Not necessarily, they're not really changing the technology. Now, the number 4 is it a materials change? And in that case, they would say yes. So we're gonna go over to flowchart C, which gives you an idea of, is it a materials change? So the first question is the device an in vitro diagnostic? No, this spine device is not. So go down to the next one, change in the material type, yes. So we're gonna go over to the middle diamond and the bottom. Is this device an implant? Yes. Moving over again. Will the affected part of the device be likely to contact body tissues or fluids? Absolutely, this is going in someone's spine permanently. So we get shunted right down to the right-hand side. This is a new 510K. If you've determined that you can do this through documentation, the FDA inspector will probably be very upset with you and say, cease and desist, submit a 510K. We don't agree with your assessment. So be very careful. Make sure you follow this guidance document when you're trying to decide if it's a new 510K or if it's a letter to file. Yeah.
When would you know if you're eligible for like an abbreviated 510K versus a traditional?
So abbreviated is if there is a guidance document or some sort of document or FDA guidance that says here are the special controls or the controls that you can follow to submit an abbreviated. Abbreviated doesn't mean that you're going to have it go any faster, and they're very rare. They're actually, I think, only like 10% of the 510Ks that are submitted. But it's if there are performance specs or a specific document that says here are the things that you have to do to get cleared at, and then you don't necessarily need all the crazy predicates. So, but traditional, even specials when you submit them, this was actually a special that this company submitted. They said, oh, we're just spraying this with a little metal coating, it's nothing. It's a special, and FDA immediately converted it over to a traditional.
What I'm curious about is the Denovo process, and I understand it's like, the stinker, kind of thing, but there are a lot of devices out there that are class 2 really, and they're not class 3. And I just read somewhere that the Denovo Denovo direction has actually been improved, and can you talk to that?
Sure, and that could be, I could go on. I have another talk that's like an hour long just about de novos. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer more questions if you want to email me. But it's
Did you bring some cards with you so people can?
I do. I have a small stack, but I didn't bring my whole stack of cards. But and you can, yeah, you'll have my email.
Just to whet your appetite.
So the de novo process is it's not cleared, it's not approved, it's granted. It's for devices that have no good predicate, and but it's not a really high-risk device. Anything that has no predicate is already shunted into the class 3 classification. They say this is PMA all the way because you can't demonstrate substantial equivalence. So if you submit a de novo, you can say, listen, we're not high risk. Here are the special controls we're going to follow to mitigate any risks that we do have. And FDA will review that, sort of similar to a 510K. And actually, the outline is very similar to a 510K. There's a couple extra sections that you have to submit. They're getting faster, FDA. There are a lot of things that I think the reviewers don't love them yet because they're just different. I think if you change anything at FDA, they're like, ugh. They don't really love change. But it's amazing. I think it's really good for innovation. I mean, I have a lot of clients right now, a lot of small startups that are really excited about this product. There's nothing else like it on the market. It's going to really help millions of people change their lives. So why would it need a PMA? Why would you need full clinical studies? So I think the direction's going that way, and they're free right now until I think MDUFA changes. So probably 2017 they're going to start charging for them. But it's a great process. I think, yeah, if anyone has any questions or wants to submit a de novo, let me know. Okay, absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike's over here.
Okay. So I think it was mentioned that the predicate device must be actively marketed or sold. So what if it's recently not sold anymore?
Right, so
you start
basically
question. Start the process all over. You need to find a predicate or wait until there's another predicate device, or
right.
I mean, it sort of doesn't make sense.
Right, no, I've used predicates that are long dead, that don't exist anymore, but I know their formulation. Let's say it's a resin or something that I know that that's exactly what the device was, and we'll test against it. Or say, the materials in our device are identical to what was cleared in that device. It doesn't have to be actively marketed as far as I know. At least I've used ones, and FDA said, no, that's fine. It's hard to get information on a lot of those. Some of the, if their web pages are down or if they don't exist anymore, it's really hard to find out more information about them.
Just a comment. I heard a lot of questions about 510K and now de novo. There is a pre-submission program FDA has. Great program. If you have a straightforward 510K, you know exactly what you're doing, go for it. But if you have any questions, you're taking multiple devices or multiple product code and you're not sure if you need a clinical study or not, even class 2 devices now they're asking clinical study. I would suggest go for pre-submission.
Absolutely. So they're pre-sub, Q-sub, there are a lot of different names for them. For the de novo process, they really highly recommend you do a PDS, a pre-de novo submission. You don't need to. You don't need to. And sometimes there are rare cases that it's not so rare, but where I actually won't recommend a pre-submission. And that would be because if there are enough unique components of a device, and I feel like if we go to FDA, there are a lot of educated people there. I know Rob sort of, said some mean things about the reviewers, but they're pretty. Some people are really, they're good, and they'll ask a lot of questions, which can be a downside because you might end up them throwing the kitchen sink at you and saying, this is a cool device but we have some nice to know questions, and those can be murder for a new device. That, if you just submitted with your predicates and said, what do you think? There's sometimes a little more incentive for the reviewers to push that along and clear it. So I think there's a huge strategy game with the pre-submission. But I think it's a free service that FDA does. So sometimes getting free help is great.
How is that different than just having a phone call or a face-to-face meeting with the FDA?
So if you try to call FDA and want some free advice.
No, to schedule the phone call.
To schedule a phone call, they'll probably say, we want a pre-submission, unless you call Dice. I can't remember, it's like the division of ICE. They used to be called Dismica, but they changed to Dice recently, and it's a free number if you just type in FDA Dice, and you can be completely anonymous, so you can ask any questions you'd like, and FDA, there will be a representative there. They can even pass your information along or forward your call or give you the number of someone that could answer your question within a branch. So that's so invaluable. I call it, and people call me and I just call Dice sometimes. It's like, well, they'll have a good idea of some basic answers. If they're bigger questions, they're going to say pre-submission, submit. DICE. Yeah.
Thank you. And what's the document that
This is called K97. It's when to submit a 510K. And the document title was a few slides back, and you'll get that in the slides when Rob sends them.
Patrick's next.
Okay.
Yeah, in regards to the de novo process, it's been my experience that you needed to have a FDA non-substantial equivalency determination prior to attempting the de novo process.
So not anymore. They've changed that. There are two processes now to get a de novo classification. You used to have to submit a 510K, get NSE, non-substantial equivalence decision, and then submit a de novo. And they would say, you have our blessing to submit a de novo. They came out with a guidance document, I think last year, where it said, that's one pathway, but you can also just submit the de novo straight now. So. And
just a follow-up question, what kind of documentation would you need to support that?
To support?
Just a clean slate de novo application.
So, as I said, they recommend a pre-submission, but you can just submit one and say, the guidance document's very clear what they want to see in that submission. And they say, you have to prove to us or give us enough evidence that this is really that has no predicates and also is a non-high-risk device.
Scott's turn.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, sorry to hit you up with all these questions, but hey, you're kind of getting around or close to my question, which is I had an experience where we were taking a device, combination device. It was a ventilator that had generated its own oxygen, and our strategist wanted to do. I thought it was a pre-IDE meeting.
It used to be called pre-IDE. They changed the name to pre-submission.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. But I really wondered what your take was on that strategy, because I felt like, first of all, we had to wait a long time for that meeting to happen, and then it kind of felt like a lot of smart people on the other end sitting around throwing darts at what could go wrong here, and that kind of sent sent my client off on a bunch of tangents, some of which I didn't think were very, very fruitful. And I've heard some other experts in medical device just say, don't do that. Just get if it's a 510K, get your submission together and treat that as a pre-submission and just start with the actual application.
Tell them what you do.
Oh, I develop products. My company does product development in medical device, so that's, we're in the services. So my clients are the ones who are actually under the, are actually the manufacturers of the devices.
Okay. So I'd say the pre-submission can be magical if you go to FDA, and I've been at FDA a few times on the other side, well, while I was at FDA and then sitting as a representative for a sponsor, where it was this kumbaya moment of everyone saying, this is such a cool device, FDA is really into it, they get their hands on it. You know, I always recommend my clients bring a device, show them how non-scary it is. You know, it's how helpful is it gonna be? What's the cost that this is, you know, this is really costing medicine right now, and how could this be really beneficial? And then you sort of make it into the marketing pitch. If they get on board, I had one FDA lead reviewer say, listen, we know you don't have a great predicate, but we like this device so much, we're gonna let you sort of, we'll help you come up with creative predicates for your submission. And it was like, oh my gosh, you know, we all left that meeting and opened some champagne.
In the pre-sub, is there a way, is it just the cost of travel to get out there? How can you ensure a face-to-face?
So there, in the guidance document as well, it sort of spells out if you want a face-to-face meeting, if you want a teleconference call, you spell that out in your pre-submission. You know, I've had the other side happen where I was at FDA and they came in and we just, you know, as you said, sort of with your client, said, here are all the things that can go wrong. You really need to address all these issues. And they were just like blown away that they, you know, oh my gosh, we had no idea that this isn't helpful at all. This is just more burdensome. But it was, you know, if they had submitted the 510K, I think they would have had the same questions. So, yeah, I think, you know, again, it's a strategy game, I think. But, yeah.
Next on the Allison show is Young.
Hi, I just have a question regarding classification of a medical device. So just to introduce myself, I'm a graduate student at UCSD, and we are trying to develop an intraocular pressure sensor that's implantable. And I believe there is no really a product in market or approved one for that purpose. And I just want to know the classification for such a device, and if you were to combine it with an existing medical device such as intraocular lens, how would we classify that kind of medical device? And how should we approach the approval process?
Wow, this is let's sit down and talk for an hour or two. Yeah.
Say it's a class 3.
Yeah, I mean, if there's nothing else like it on the market, I've heard Mark Melkerson, who's my former boss at FDA, a few times has said, I was talking to a couple of reviewers 2 weeks ago, and they were saying, oh, he keeps saying for an implantable, Denovo, that's a Denovo, and they're so shocked that some implantables are getting through as a Denovo submission, which blows my mind. So there's a possibility, but it sounds, I mean, if it's an implant, it sounds.
So we're going to chalk that one up to too hard to answer
That's a hard
succinctly.
answer, sorry, man.
Yeah, Vivek is next.
Email me though, I'm happy to chat to you more.
So I have a couple of questions. They may be stupid, you have to bear with me.
Say that again?
I have a couple of questions. They may be stupid questions, but you have to bear with me. Okay, so we're a medical device company. We've invented a phototherapy device. It has 10 features. For example, let's say it has 10 features. Our engineer told me that there's a predicate device which has 9 features very similar to our device. So should we start this in a way where we just apply for FDA this time only for 9 features, and later, once we get into market, make some revenue, work on the 10th feature? Is that a good strategy?
I would say so. If you can give substantial equivalence to those 9 features, start there, and then you have a device on the market. You don't need to maybe submit an IDE. You can just do some clinical study for the other 6 features or whatever you'd like, and then submit a 510K. And then you're submitting a 510K with your own device. So that's even better, right? You can just claim substantial equivalence to your own device.
Awesome. Second question was about, I don't know, this is going back to the conversation that Rob was talking about. So we've started preparing the 510K documentation for our device, and we're doing a lot of testing. And And you talked about using foreign testing for clinical trials, and it has you have to have a protocol for that. That's okay for clinical trials, but for EMC, for other testing like biocompatibility, cytotoxicity, all those testings, would those also, international data would also be accepted?
Go ahead.
I'm almost finished. You can use testing data, benchtop testing data from any lab, even your own lab yourself. It doesn't have to be even in an independent lab, but you do need to show what test method you used, and it really helps if it's a recognized test method like an ASTM or ISO test method. So, for instance, a lot of companies that make those kind of products all the time, they'll do a lot of that testing in-house rather than outsource it all the time because outsourcing, somebody's making a profit. So it's not objectionable to use outside the US testing data. That's not a problem at all.
I would say if it's safety, you make sure it's GLP, so you don't want to do that yourself. And there are some test labs that have better reputations than others. I mean, I would see a report in a 510K and say, oh, I like this lab. I know it's going to be, I know their integrity is good, and I wouldn't go through their submission as much with a fine-tooth comb as I would another. So, yeah.
James has a question, but I have a question for James before I give you the mic. Can I get part of that Twix bar? Hey, just one. Here is the microphone.
Very good. You get addicted on it. No FDA approval. So the question is.
Oh, I don't know.
So the question is, you mentioned the FDA likes to see cool devices have minimal risk or no risk at all, and come up with creative predicate devices. So, I mean, isn't that like a risky approach for a company to go there and then that doesn't happen? Versus,
Sure,
I mean, the company just playing the paper thing and I mean, or the electronic submission and proposing a predicate device, and then if the FDA doesn't agree with it, propose another one?
Sure, so that's another strategy thing. I think that's why it's good to call Rob, call me. I mean, we'll sort of help you with that strategy. I agree. I think sometimes it can be really dangerous to go to FDA. You know, they can really put the kibosh on an idea that it might have made it through. It might have been substantially equivalent. You know, so yeah, I think the pre-submission process is great if you have, you know, you're not supposed to ask, is this a 510K, is this a de novo? That process is a 513G or a, yeah, yeah. It's like getting my numbers all mixed up. But, I mean, just what I'll say is if you go in with a pre-submission, have very specific questions, say, here are our 4 questions. We really only want you to answer these 4 questions. They often will say, here's some feedback we have, a couple, you know, it can be 1 or 2 things they want you to consider. If you go in, they'll have 5 or 6 people maybe sitting there, and they'll, I mean, spend the whole hour either giving you positive feedback or maybe nitpicking things. So.
Hi, my name is Cora Marinkovic. I work for Cortex Labs. We created software that helps with, we measure subcortical structures based on MRI scans. We are also working on now to add PET scan information to that. And we are FDA cleared and CE marked as of last year. Mm-hmm. So now this is coming up. We are working on this PET, you know, addition to this, to the base of the software name is NeuroPoint, that takes MRI scans and provides volumetric information. So what would this be then, adding a additional PET scan information? I mean, what would you know, filing be for that?
So you're kind of Frankensteining a device together?
Yeah, I mean, it can be CT scan, you know, as well added to that. I mean, so that you have more information on brain structures.
Right, so I think as long as, I mean, if you have, and they're both your predicates, right? I mean, you're okay. I mean, this is another 510K. It's not going to be 96 clearance. Okay. I mean, yeah, I think I would say that's straightforward.
Leah is next.
Sorry.
This is kind of diverging from that particular topic, but having to do with a lot of the biomarkers that are out there now, there's a lot going on, whether it's genomic or protein. And some companies, you're probably aware, are creating what they call laboratory-developed tests. They're going under CLIA. They're selling the products. There's no FDA associated with that. To an extent, it's not pure FDA. What are your thoughts on where that's going to go? And I think I might have seen a recent, somewhat of a provisional guidance document coming out. But where are we there? Because it appears as if the labs are moving forward as they desire.
Right. And it's a lot of who's got the money to do the testing that FDA wants to see. I know that there have been quite a few de novos, but that's a very loaded question with what is FDA thinking with LDTs? I don't know, Rob. That one's gonna, huh? They're going to regulate them. Yeah, that's where we're moving. But I don't know I don't have my fingers on the pulse of how they're feeling about that. Do you want to answer? Is that in your wheelhouse?
Tell us what you do.
Yeah, they put it so.
It's Connie.
I'm previously notified body auditor. I just recently left there to start up my own business with enterprise software, bringing regulatory and compliance on board and making it easy for people to do the right thing. I've been following the LDT, and FDA has come out with a guidance document or a draft. It's out for comment. They have a 10-year program, and they're going to hit probably the most similar to industry type devices first. There's a lot of diagnostics that are going on in the laboratory where the laboratory is actually personalized, looking at the disease state of a patient and deciding what needs upregulating or downregulating, what component are they missing. FDA is not going to go after that kind of a diagnostic. But when a companion diagnostic comes out, the company has spent 10 years bringing it to market, and the laboratory goes, oh, we could put that antibody together. Those are probably the ones at highest risk. So if it's already commercially available, they're going to be up higher in the list, but I don't know what the exact timeline is. The 21st Century Cures, anybody familiar with the 21st Century Cures? It's the safety committee right now. I think the hashtag is 21st Century Cures on Twitter, but they have talked with Shuren extensively in Hamburg about moving in this direction.
Thank you, Connie. So Leah, meet Connie later. David?
I got two questions. One is, at what point in the application you can talk to FDA? You can call them and discuss.
Sure,
second question is, if you have two identical devices, just cosmetic difference, do you have to go through all the sections, including biocompatibility test, all that?
If it applies, if it doesn't, make sure that you put in, as Rob said, that this does not apply to us. For communication, you will get your reviewer's name, the lead reviewer's name, with the with the acceptance, or the RTA. So by day 15, you'll have the reviewer's email and name. I don't recommend pestering them. Even in the guidance document, it says if they go over 10 days over a limit of, if they're supposed to contact you by day 60. They're supposed to give you a decision by day 90. If they go to day 100, you actually then can reach out and contact them. If it's something where they've given you a hold letter and they said, here are the deficiencies we want you to answer, and you have questions, absolutely reach out to them. I have a clarification question, can I get you on the phone? So they're usually pretty open to that. Okay, so this company had a new 510K. So this is what they submitted. This is their 510K. They didn't redact it. This is their cover letter. This is some information about the cage that they were submitting. So you can see their measurements. This is great. If you're a competitor, you can say, okay, our measurements are very similar to this. Here's what we want to get through FDA. And then they have some information on material characterization. You can see the pieces that are redacted, or when it talks about the surface, clearly that's proprietary information. So here's the requirements in this. David, this probably goes to your communication question as well. So by day 15, you'll have an answer to the acceptance review. You should by day 7 get an idea if they've received it. So make sure you get that receipt letter. By day 15, the reviewer will contact you. If everything's in the submission, they'll sort of go through it very quickly to make sure all the components are there. They'll say it's accepted, which is the smiley face, or they'll refuse to accept it. As Leo stated, you will get shunted back to day 0 if you are refused. So you can start that clock over and over again if you're refused multiple times. So by day 60, they've done their substantive review. By this point, there are 2 decisions. Either they're going to have additional information requested, which they also call a telephone hold. They don't call you, it's usually an email, or they have an interactive review. An interactive review has the smiley face next to it because it means that they believe that they can get any questions they might have about your device or to demonstrate substantial equivalence, they can do that interactively. So they're saying, we're going to keep it on our clock. So you know that if they have interactive review, you're only 30 days out from getting a clearance. If you cannot answer their questions interactively, they will put you on hold. So make sure that if they say, we need this report, give it to us within 5 days, get it to them within 5 days, or they'll put you on hold. So the MDUFA targets, I'm not going to explain MDUFA, but the targets, the goals that FDA had, by 2013, they wanted 65% of the submissions to have a substantive review or an interaction by day 60. By 2016, they're wanting 95% of these. So you'll see the reviewers are going to really try and stick to this day 60. By day 90, you get a decision. So it's either not substantially equivalent, an SE, or it's substantially equivalent, which is SE. So there are the targets again for the decision date. And the total time to decision, the target that FDA has for 2017 is 124 days. So a lot of clients ask me, like, how long is this going to take? You know, even if we're put on hold, you have 180 days to answer additional information questions. So it's really up to you. But FDA is saying, even with the questions that we're asking, we're hoping to have 124 days be the entire review clock. So here's the letter that this company received on, I don't know what day, but they said, we have received your 510K, it's in-house. The next thing they'll send, and this is just a hypothetical one, is the RTA checklist. And what Leo said is, you know, he sort of covered the list, but what I often do is I'll include the RTA checklist, and I do things a little differently than Rob. I actually do submit an entire PDF, and I don't do the sections because what I'll do with the RTA checklist is I'll take the RTA checklist, say, yes, this component is in the submission, and I'll put in the comments section where it can be found. So I'll often get an RTA, or I'll get an acceptance within, I think the fastest I've gotten was on day 2, which was amazing. The reviewer essentially got it, went through my RTA checklist, found everything, and said, all right, we're on the clock. So it's in your best interest if you sort of help fill it out for them. So the acceptance review notification is the next thing you'll receive. And this, at the last line, you'll see the lead reviewer assigned to your submission is blah, and that'll be their email address. So you'll get this by day 15 if it's accepted. The next thing that FDA does, the lead reviewer is going to send out her lead, or the request consults within FDA. So in this case, the reviewer commented that she sent out 3 consults. One was to Shrin over in OCEL, one was to Matthew, and one was to Shika. So different offices, different branches. Those people are usually experts in a specific field. And so she'll send out, hey, I guess to Matthew, can you review the electrical safety data? Because that's not in her wheelhouse. So I often was the one that was doing biocompatibility, or the sterilization shelf life, if they needed a biologist. So you have clinical, they have MDs on staff. If you have an animal study, they'll get a vet involved. Next thing, they'll go through their checklist, and I was sort of amazed that this wasn't redacted because the reviewers come up with these checklists, and they're not supposed to be made public, so I was kind of happy when I was like, oh, this is the checklist that I used to use, and now it's public, so I can use it in my talks. So they would say, you know, everything that they wanted in the label, the surgical technique manual, and in the insert, the package insert. And so if there are things missing, they leave them unchecked in their memo. So this is part of the memorandum that Caroline put together. She was the lead reviewer on this file. And so the reviewer will then comment, and you can see at the bottom, the draft surgical technique manual is not included. The sponsor will be asked to supply the most recent copy of this manual. So in deficiency, this was her deficiency number 14, so this was a very lengthy deficiency list. But you know that deficiency essentially said, please send us your surgical technique manual. Another thing I like to point out is sterilization shelf life. They don't need the reports for this, and it's spelled out in the RTA checklist. Do not send the report, just send us your sterilization parameters. So make sure you're very clear and that you say that we're sterilizing to an assurance level SAL of 10 to the negative 6. They expect that you have the testing done, that the verification or the validation studies for your sterilization have been done, but they don't want to see the reports. So, yeah, quick question.
What's your thoughts on the cleaning validation, too? Recently, I've had comments back that we contain no validation for cleaning.
Sure. So have they asked for the reports? Or they just asked about the cleaning?
Just the summary.
Right. So, and that's what I'm getting to. And so in the section that Rob talked about, that's sterilization, I've now started calling it the sterilization cleaning section. Because if there is a cleaning process, you've just seen it so much in the news of like tissue being left on inside the lumen of a screw, or it's terrifying, or a screwdriver. So they're becoming more vigilant with a lot of the cleaning validations and just wanting to know that it's been done. So she put together, Caroline got her consults back from the different reviewers, the consults that she had sent out. She put together her memo. So this is quite a lengthy document. And at the bottom of the memo, after she's gone through, and she goes by section by section, similar to how you're putting the 510K together, she'll go section 1, what's missing, section 2, what's missing. If there are no deficiencies, or if it wasn't applicable, she'll still have it in her memo, but she'll say this is not applicable. At the very end, she'll have the full list of deficiencies. The deficiencies at the top are usually the ones that are most critical. And if it's a new reviewer, sometimes they can just be willy-nilly, they'll just throw them into a list. But a good reviewer will have the most critical ones that if they think if you don't have a good answer to it, they will not be able to give you an SE decision. So really try and make sure to ask questions. If you have questions, ask them about the top ones.
Allison mentioned that she had a pre-sub presentation. Is that available in a format you can give to other people or sell to them?
I have a Denovo presentation, but I have...
So you have a Denovo one, not a pre-sub.
I haven't put together a pre-sub one. Yeah.
So I have a pre-sub one, but I don't have a Denovo one, so...
Okay. Yeah, if people email me and are interested for it, I'm happy to send them some slides. Okay, so this is the deficiency letter. This is the hold letter, the telephone hold letter. This was signed by Ron Jean. He was the branch chief at the time for this device. So we reviewed your 510K. We can't determine if it's substantially equivalent until you address the following. This is usually in an email. So check your spam folder. We had one that was in the sponsor spam folder, and we were well into our 180 days before they found it. So you have 180 days to answer the hold letter. Do communicate with the reviewer before you work on your response if you have any questions. The reviewer might recommend a pre-submission within your 510K. I hate it when they do this because it just adds more time. And if you have questions, you should just be able to say, this is what we're going to do. If it's an animal study they're asking for, you can, I've often said, can you just review the protocol before we move forward with the animal study? You can ask for an extension to the 180 days as well if you run up against that ceiling. You only have one chance to get it right now. They used to allow multiple holds, and this example I'm giving you was one that had multiple holds, but now you have one time, so make sure your response is going to make the reviewer happy. So this was the response that they sent in. And this is the answer. So Caroline sent out all of the responses. So this was their letter with they had the deficiency, and then they would put the response to the deficiency in this letter. If there were any new tests, they would put, they'd have tabs and make sure that all that information was included in this supplement. And then Caroline receives it. She sends it out, the necessary components out to her consults within FDA, and she has them decide if they've answered their deficiencies, the deficiencies that they've come up with. She collects that information. So, and by day 90, she has to make a decision. So she did finally decide this is substantially equivalent. So, and you'll go through, you can see in her comments, okay, here are the comments that she had the deficiency, the sponsor's response to the deficiency, and then at the very bottom on the right, it says there are no remaining biocompatibility issues at this time. So she feels satisfied that the sponsor has given a sufficient answer. At the very bottom, she'll go through a checklist. So this is section 14 at the very bottom, and the final decision at number 9 is, do the data demonstrate equivalence? Answer is yes. Final decision is SE. So at the very bottom, Ranjin signs again, branch chief signs. The deputy director has a time to review it as well if they choose to, and to sign off on it. For a new reviewer, they're often recommended to have their mentor read it before it goes to the branch chief. Every new reviewer has a mentor within their branch. This is the final document, the cover sheet to the memo, where she says, here's everything that I've reviewed, substantially equivalent. Again, everyone signs off on it. They get a substantially equivalent letter. So this is the letter that you get, and then you open the champagne. Or an email. I got 3 seconds.
No, 3 o'clock.
Oh, it's 3 o'clock. Okay. I'm gonna,
Go.
I'm not going to give you the deficiencies. I'm just going to explain Fourpart Harmony really quickly because this is what the reviewers are trained on. So every deficiency should have 4 parts to it. And so this is part of the hold letter. The Fourpart Harmony includes what was provided, why the information provided is not sufficient, what additional information is needed, and why the requested additional information is needed to answer a regulatory question. So on the right-hand side, these were the courses that new reviewers were given last year. They're all supposed to write these deficiencies in Fourpart Harmony. I get some reviewers that are new that I call them 16-part crazy because they just have no idea what they're asking, or it'll just say, we want more biocompatibility, and that's it. So if you get one of those, you know you're dealing with a new reviewer. This is a deficiency. Maybe we could just make this a practice. Once you get the slides, underline what the 4 parts are. This is a very good deficiency. I think I wrote it. No. I did write the response. So this is a response that was found acceptable. This is one of 16-part crazy. So I won't take any questions, but I'm happy to take emails. I'm sorry that I have to.
When I said, Rob, who should be on this panel with you? He says, I have to introduce you to Allison. And he said, you'd be great, but I didn't think you'd be this great. Who here thinks Allison is great?